What if one teacher's final breath left behind not one path, but three? Three roads to enlightenment, each claiming truth, each shaping civilizations. And here's the twist. Each one says the others got it wrong. But look closer, and you'll see, they're not seeking the same goal. One monk pursues his own liberation, following the Buddha's earliest words exactly as they were spoken 2,500 years ago. Another has vowed something almost unimaginable, to save every living being before he himself enters nirvana. A third sits in silence, practicing secret methods once hidden for over 1,000 years, believing he can reach enlightenment in this very life. How did a single teacher's message, so simple, so clear, give birth to three radically different paths? Today, we uncover the surprising story behind Buddhism's Great Divide. A story shaped not just by teachings, but by geography, politics, language, and human longing. And perhaps the biggest twist? That this division may have been exactly what the world needed. The year is 483 BCE. The Buddha lies beneath a grove of sal trees, surrounded by disciples. His final words are profound and troubling. Then, he is gone. Imagine the silence that followed. A teacher who had spent 45 years walking, teaching, guiding, yet never wrote anything down. No appointed successor. No formal doctrine. Only memories, oral traditions, and one haunting question. What exactly did the Buddha teach? At first, this wasn't a problem, but as Buddhism began to cross borders, its message flowed like a river into new terrain. Each culture it touched added something, shifted something, reinterpreted something, and just like that, three great streams were born. In the humid landscapes of Southeast Asia, one tradition claimed to preserve the Buddha's earliest words. They called it Theravada, the way of the elders. In the vast mountains and valleys of China, Korea, and Japan, a new vision took shape. They called it Mahayana, the great vehicle. And in the remote peaks of Tibet, Buddhism merged with ancient local practices, creating the secretive Vajrayāna, the diamond vehicle. But our story begins not in a temple, but in a royal court. It's 247 BCE, 2 centuries after the Buddha's death. Prince Mahinda, the son of the mighty Emperor Ashoka, has taken monastic vows. He's about to embark on a dangerous mission, sailing across monsoon seas to the island of Lanka. Carrying the future of Buddhism on his back, the journey was perilous. Pirates, storms, disease, many never returned. But Mahinda wasn't just risking his life. Back in India, Buddhism itself was under threat. Hindu revivals were rising, foreign invasions loomed, and the ancient oral teachings of the Buddha, the very heartbeat of the tradition, were in danger of being lost forever. Mahinda and his monks would arrive at Mihantale, and there, the first great Buddhist transmission outside India would begin. As the last scene fades, we find ourselves stepping into the next chapter of Buddhism's incredible journey, a moment that would shape the spiritual landscape of an entire region for centuries to come. High on a rocky outcrop near the ancient capital of Anuradhapura, something remarkable was about to happen. King Devanampiya Tissa, out hunting in the forested hills, spotted a group of unfamiliar, shaven-headed men dressed in simple robes. These were no ordinary travelers. According to the ancient Mahavamsa chronicle, the cautious king approached them and asked, "Who are you?" Mahinda, calm and resolute, gave a reply that would echo through history. "We are monks, Your Majesty, followers of the King of Dharma, the Buddha. We have come from India with a message of liberation." What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Right there, beneath the open sky, Mahinda began reciting the Chulahatthipadopama Sutta, an intricate discourse from the Buddhist teachings. And in that very moment, something shifted. The king listened, deeply moved, and on the spot, he converted. But this was no ordinary religious conversion. It marked the birth of something far more enduring, Theravada Buddhism. The word Theravada literally means the way of the elders. And these monks weren't out to reinvent the teachings. Their mission was clear. They believed they were carrying something sacred, something beyond value. The very words of the Buddha, passed down in an unbroken oral chain for 400 years. No additions, no reinterpretations, just the truth, as it had been spoken under the Bodhi tree. And it was this unwavering devotion to preserving the Buddha's words that became Theravada's greatest strength. At a time when Buddhism in India was under siege, from resurgent Hinduism and foreign invasions, it was the island of Sri Lanka that became Buddhism's sanctuary. In the sacred city of Anuradhapura, golden stupas shimmered under the sun, and the monks made a revolutionary decision. For the first time in 4 centuries, they wrote the teachings down. What emerged was the Pali Canon, comprised of the Vinaya, the Sutta Pitaka, and the Abhidhamma, forming the most complete collection of early Buddhist scripture in existence. But Theravada's brilliance lay not just in preservation, it lay in its clarity and practicality. Here, the path to enlightenment was methodical, solid, step by step. It began with moral conduct, laying a stable foundation. It sharpened with concentration, focusing the mind like a blade. And it culminated in wisdom, cutting through the illusions that bind us to suffering. No elaborate rituals, no mystical shortcuts, just disciplined practice toward personal liberation. And from that discipline arose something rare, enduring peace. Societies shaped by Theravada teachings grew to be among the most stable and spiritually harmonious in human history. To this day, Theravada remains the dominant tradition across Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, guiding more than 150 million Buddhists. But while Theravada focused inward, other regions, China, Korea, Japan, began to ask new questions. What if compassion meant more than just freeing yourself? What if the Buddha's path was not the end, but merely the beginning? These bold, expansive ideas would give rise to a spiritual movement far larger in scope, one that redefined the very goal of enlightenment itself. To understand it, we must begin with one of the most moving legends in all of Buddhist lore, the story of Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of infinite compassion. He stood before the celestial Buddha Amitabha and made a vow so immense. It echoes to this day. We've just witnessed how a new vision of Buddhism began to take root, one that expanded beyond personal liberation and dared to embrace the liberation of all sentient beings. Now, let's dive deeper into the origin of that vision through one of the most powerful legends in all Buddhist literature. According to the ancient texts, Despite Avalokiteshvara's tireless dedication, suffering across the world never ceased. For every soul he saved, 10 more fell into pain, confusion, and darkness. The task became endless, the burden immeasurable, and in a moment of unbearable sorrow, something unimaginable happened. Avalokiteshvara's heart shattered. His head split into fragments. His body crumbled, and his spirit collapsed beneath the weight of infinite compassion facing infinite suffering. It was not weakness, but the breaking point of someone who had given everything. But then came a miracle. Amitabha Buddha, witnessing the devastation of his spiritual son, intervened. With divine intention, he transformed Avalokiteshvara. He gave him 11 heads to perceive the cries of the world from all directions, and 1,000 arms to reach out and aid every being in need. The symbolism is profound. True compassion does not retreat when it becomes overwhelmed, it expands. It evolves. It multiplies its capacity to serve. This legend became the heartbeat of a new wave in Buddhist thinking, emerging around the 1st century BCE. While Theravada monks focused on solitary salvation and personal liberation, this new movement had an entirely different aspiration. They called themselves followers of the Mahayana, the Great Vehicle. Their mission? Not to escape suffering, but to carry everyone across the sea of suffering to the shore of enlightenment. This was more than a name, it was a philosophical revolution. Theravada upheld the path of the Arhat, a perfected individual who, through disciplined practice, achieves nirvana and leaves the cycle of rebirth. Mahayana, however, elevated a different figure, the Bodhisattva, an awakened being who, upon reaching enlightenment, vows to remain in the world until every last sentient being is freed. The shift was radical. Mahayana teachers began to teach that the real purpose of awakening wasn't to escape the world, but to embrace it. Enlightenment wasn't a hidden realm far away, it was right here, in the heart of everyday life. Samsara and nirvana, they said, were not two places, but two ways of seeing the same reality. And as Mahayana spread northward from India, it didn't dominate or erase local cultures, it merged with them. In China, it blended with Taoist philosophy to form new schools of thought. The idea of Buddha nature emerged, the revolutionary belief that every being already possesses the seed of enlightenment. Pure Land Buddhism offered salvation through devotion to Amitabha, while Chan Buddhism, later known in Japan as Zen, emphasized awakening through silence, simplicity, and direct experience, beyond logic or language. Yet Mahayana's greatest strength may have been its adaptability. While Theravada preserved original forms with great precision, Mahayana became a shape-shifter, constantly evolving to meet the hearts, minds, and cultures of the people it touched. Today, Mahayana Buddhism embraces over 500 million practitioners. Whether it's a Zen monk sitting in stillness in Kyoto, a Pure Land devotee chanting Amitabha's name in Beijing, or a scholar studying Mahayana philosophy in Seoul, they all carry the spirit of Avalokiteshvara's vow to help every being, no matter the cost. But our journey through Buddhism's three great traditions is not yet complete. There's one more path to explore, one born in the high Himalayas, where ancient shamanic practices met Buddhist insight to create something mysterious, powerful, and transformative. Vajrayāna, the diamond vehicle. While Mahayana Buddhism spread across East Asia with flexibility and depth, our story is still incomplete. To fully understand the tapestry of Buddhism, we must journey higher, into the snow-capped peaks of the Tibetan Plateau. Here, in one of the world's most isolated and mystical landscapes, something extraordinary was unfolding. It was around 750 CE. King Trisong Detsen of Tibet faced what seemed like an impossible challenge. He wanted to establish the first Buddhist monastery in his mountain kingdom, a spiritual sanctuary nestled among the clouds. But every attempt met with strange failure. Walls collapsed mysteriously overnight, foundations cracked without warning. Workers abandoned the project in fear. It was as if the land itself rejected this foreign religion. Whispers filled the court, rumors of angry spirits and ancient mountain gods. The Bon shamans, Tibet's indigenous spiritual leaders, warned the king that these mountains were sacred and the Buddhist project was doomed to fail. Then, a message arrived from India, an answer cloaked in legend. Enter Padmasambhava, known to Tibetans as Guru Rinpoche, the precious master. He wasn't just a monk. He was a tantric adept, a spiritual warrior trained in the most advanced and esoteric practices of Indian Buddhism. And he was about to change everything. As Padmasambhava made his way through the treacherous Himalayan passes, legend says he encountered the very spirits and demons haunting the monastery builders. But instead of driving them away, he did something no one expected. He transformed them. Using powerful tantric rituals, mantras, and meditative insight, he didn't banish these forces, he bound them to a sacred oath. One by one, he turned these wrathful spirits into Dharmapalas, protectors of the Dharma. These once hostile deities became fierce guardians of Tibetan Buddhism. And with that, Vajrayāna Buddhism was born, the diamond vehicle. The diamond, after all, is indestructible and cuts through anything. So too does Vajrayāna aim to cut through delusion with unmatched clarity and power. Unlike Theravada's gradual path or Mahayana's expansive compassion, Vajrayāna offers a daring promise: enlightenment in a single lifetime. Not someday, not in another life, but here and now, within this very body. But the path is intense. Vajrayāna practitioners use powerful tools, intricate visualizations where they imagine themselves as awakened deities, mantras whose sacred vibrations align body and mind, and detailed mandalas that serve as spiritual maps of the cosmos. These aren't symbolic. They're practical tools designed to rapidly transform ordinary perception into awakened insight. For over 1,000 years, Tibet flourished as a unique civilization where the pursuit of enlightenment wasn't just spiritual, it was cultural, political, and deeply woven into everyday life. Monasteries became centers of learning, art, and healing. The Dalai Lama, a spiritual leader, was also a national guide. But in 1950, all of that changed. The Chinese invasion shattered Tibet's centuries-old traditions. In 1959, the 14th Dalai Lama fled into exile, carrying with him the burden of an entire spiritual legacy. It was a devastating blow. But from this loss came something remarkable. Tibetan teachers, once bound by mountains and monastic walls, now spread across the globe. Secrets once reserved for initiates were now shared in New York, Paris, Kathmandu, and beyond. A tradition that once thrived in isolation began to inspire the world. Yet this global expansion brings with it a profound question. Can Vajrayāna's ancient rituals and sacred teachings retain their power when removed from the culture that shaped them? That question remains open, but what's clear is this: Vajrayāna, born in the crucible of Tibet's elemental forces, offers one of the most profound, intense, and transformative paths in all of Buddhism. And now, having explored Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayāna, we return to the bigger picture. What did the Buddha really mean, and how did one man's silence echo into so many voices across the world? The rise of Vajrayāna in Tibet brought our journey through Buddhism's three great traditions to a dramatic peak. But as we descend from the mountains, another question comes into view, one that may shape the future of spiritual development itself. For more than 2,000 years, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayāna evolved in relative isolation, separated by geography, language, and culture. But today, that isolation has vanished. In our interconnected world, the once separate paths are converging in surprising, and sometimes confusing, ways. Step into a modern meditation retreat, and you might witness a fusion of traditions, Theravādan breath awareness, Mahayana compassion meditations, and Vajrayāna visualizations, all taught under one roof. Is this an unprecedented spiritual evolution? Or are we witnessing the dilution of lineages built over centuries? Despite their stylistic differences, these traditions rest on common ground. All three uphold the Four Noble Truths, rely on the Three Jewels, and understand enlightenment as a profound transformation of consciousness, not just an idea, but an irreversible shift in how one sees and lives. Their differences, then, are often a matter of emphasis, not essence. Theravada's focus on personal liberation doesn't mean it lacks compassion. Mahayana's vow to save all beings doesn't abandon individual insight. Vajrayāna's intense techniques aren't shortcuts that skip the foundation, they build on it. Rather than competing, these paths may represent different phases or dimensions of a complete spiritual journey. Think of them not as separate roads, but as interwoven trails that meet at key points, each offering something unique for the seeker. And in this convergence, we're witnessing something both exciting and delicate. Today, a Zen master might train under a Tibetan Lama. A Western Vipassana practitioner might take refuge in the Bodhisattva vow. Students now have access to tools once confined to specific regions, an opportunity previous generations could only imagine. But with that opportunity comes risk. Traditional teachers raise a valid concern. Can deep transformation occur when teachings are mixed without true understanding? When spiritual methods become spiritual sampling, does depth give way to novelty? Is there a danger that centuries of hard-earned insight could dissolve into surface-level practices? Perhaps the solution lies not in choosing one path over another, but in honoring the purpose each tradition was built to serve. Theravada shines in cultivating mindfulness and personal clarity. Mahayana expands that clarity into compassionate action. Vajrayāna brings skillful means to transform life's rawest energies into wisdom. These aren't opposing philosophies. They may be complementary chapters in a spiritual education that is both personal and universal. In a way, Buddhism is returning to its roots, an experimental, Adaptive path built on skillful means. Always evolving to meet people where they are. And that brings us to the ultimate question. One that has lingered like incense through 2.500 years of Buddhist history. But before we open that final mystery, imagine this. A master sits before 3 students. Each comes from a different tradition. Each holds a different understanding of the path. What does the master say? Let's find out. After exploring the convergence of Buddhism's 3 great traditions in our modern age, we're left with a compelling image: 3 students, seated before a single master. Each of them follows a different path. But how does the master respond? To the first student, he says nothing at all, teaching through silence, allowing realization to rise like mist from still waters. To the second, he answers with riddles and paradoxes, shaking loose the student's deepest assumptions. To the third, he invokes dramatic fire meditations, bold techniques that jolt the mind into sudden awakening. Is this master inconsistent, or simply wise enough to recognize that different minds require different keys to open the same door? Which path did the Buddha truly intend? Each tradition, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayāna, claims to be the most faithful to the original teachings. Yet recent archaeological discoveries suggest a far more surprising truth. Fragments of ancient texts, written in Gandhari, Sanskrit, and other early languages, reveal a form of Buddhism that was already diverse from the very beginning. These scriptures don't align perfectly with any one school. Instead, they reveal a living tradition that adapted to the needs of its audience. Could it be that the Buddha himself, a master teacher with profound compassion and clarity, deliberately offered different methods to different students? To those who needed logic and structure, he gave analytical teachings. To those moved by empathy, he revealed a vast vision of compassion. To the few ready for intense inner transformation, he offered advanced, esoteric practices. After all, a great teacher doesn't hand the same tool to every apprentice. Why would the Buddha, who taught for 45 years across cultures and personalities, rely on only one method? Maybe the real misunderstanding isn't that these traditions disagree, but that we've treated them as separate in the first place. What if they're 3 windows into the same radiant truth? What if Theravada's discipline, Mahayana's loving vow, and Vajrayāna's transformational energy are all facets of the Buddha's complete wisdom? As these ancient paths enter a globalized world, a new question arises. Can they preserve their depth while adapting to the modern seeker? The answer may shape not only the future of Buddhism, but the spiritual direction of humanity. But perhaps, the truest teaching is this: the path itself is the teacher. And no matter where you begin, through the sharp clarity of Theravada, the open heart of Mahayana, or the fierce grace of Vajrayāna, all sincere seekers are climbing the same mountain. Their methods may differ, their symbols may vary, but above the clouds, where all paths rise, they meet at the same summit, the awakened mind. So, which path speaks to you? Are you drawn to Theravada's steady precision, Mahayana's boundless compassion, or Vajrayāna's raw transformative power? Let us know in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, because whichever path calls to you, it may be calling you home.